Hello, welcome to another episode of the CyberDudes podcast. I am Robin Thornton. I am solo today, or at least for this intro portion of it, because we are foregoing the news. We're back after a week or so break due to, well, basically I had to fly back home for seeing some family. But what we have for you this week is an interview with an old colleague of mine and Omar's at day job, Phil Ruffin. He's moved on, as I said, he was an old colleague. He's moved on to new roles, but he is a cybersecurity governance and compliance engineer, and he's, I wouldn't say new in his roles, but he's definitely in the early stages of his cyber career, having been, cut his teeth in the help desk space. He's going to be talking to us about moving into the cybersecurity realm from a help desk role, which is traditionally quite a typical route into cybersecurity, but he's going to be discussing with us his struggles in doing that, the challenges that he had, and aspects of the role that he has found himself very capably performing as an independent contractor in that space. So expect to learn things such as why introspection and self-assessment is so crucial for career growth, and especially how it helped Phil get into the cybersecurity space, how networking and mentorship really did open the doors for him in terms of getting into his current roles, and how certifications alone will not land you a job in cybersecurity. Rounding that off, we also discuss why hiring and the recruitment aspect of cybersecurity just seems so broken at the moment. But before we get into that, please, if you are not already subscribed to us, and if you're not already liking our videos, please do give us a like right down here if you're on YouTube, and a subscribe. And if you're listening to us on Spotify, give us a follow as well, and rate the podcast. It really does help our numbers. Incidentally, and we'll go over this next week, but incidentally, the podcast is a year old as of 6 days ago. Sorry. So we got a little birthday to celebrate there. I'll be making sure that we celebrate that a little bit more thoroughly with Omar on our next normal format episode. But for now, I will leave you in the capable hands of Omar and myself and Phil, and we'll see you on the other side.
Hey, so Phil, it's good to see you again. It's been kind of a while.
It's been a long time.
Yeah. How's things going? What have you been doing with yourself since we last spoke?
Oh, well, so I actually was on a contract with Johnson & Johnson in their information security risk management program, doing some supply chain risk management. So did that for about a year. Unfortunately, due to some budget constraints, they weren't able to renew the contract. So found myself back on the market, but luckily I wasn't on there too long. I actually landed a role as a technical support engineer with Tenable. And everyone knows Tenable makes the product Nessus, which helps vulnerability management programs run as successfully as they do. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that start next week on the 18th, and I'm really excited about it.
Excellent, good stuff. Yeah, I did see when you were looking for a new role, I was thinking, you'll be all right. He'll land on his feet. But if it's one of those. If anybody needs any help ever, we're all in the industry. It's always a matter of give each other a bit of a helping hand.
Absolutely.
Now, I think last time we spoke as well, you weren't, or at least face to face, you weren't in the cyber sort of fraternity, as it were, because where we work and you worked, you were in our help desk staff. How did you actually find yourself getting a role in the cyber industry? Because that's something that a lot of people do struggle with.
It's tough. What I really needed to do was really assess where I was at that current place. And what I did was a SWOT assessment on myself. I looked at my strengths, my weaknesses, my obstacles, and my threats. Basically, what would inhibit me from landing a cyber position. I looked at what I can offer a company. I looked at what I wasn't able to offer a company in terms of my weaknesses, any obstacles in terms of like education, certifications, my network, because we know networking is huge. That interaction that you have, like with Omar being my mentor, with knowing you from MSK, it's really important to have a sounding board that you can really expand your ideas and really see what it is that you want to get into and what threats face you in terms of getting to those objectives. And it really took a long time to really land on what I wanted to do. I had some technical experience. I had some good soft skills, but I felt like there was something that was missing. Mm-hmm. So I had a mentorship program with a company called Synac, and Synac basically helps companies with their penetration testing, their whole security program. And I had a mentor during that period, which really helped me answer a lot of the questions that I had. And he decided that the best thing for me to do was to really find a place in security that really spoke to me. I thought I wanted to be a pen tester at some point, and I decided that's not really what I wanted to do. And it's really hard to know where you want to be unless you're actually doing the thing. So many people say, hey, you got to pick an area, because everyone just says cybersecurity. And that's just a broad term that can encompass so many different things. So after just really looking internally at what I needed to do as far as getting my skills together, knowing what area I wanted to be in, I had actually decided to go back to school. And I think the education route has definitely opened my eyes to a lot of things, because, WGU, where I'm going, provides a lot of certification, but the way they've changed the curriculum gives you an opportunity to touch a lot of different things. They've added some more practical hands-on courses to the coursework, which is super important, because everybody wants to have a cyber career, but you need those actual hands-on cyber skills to be able to do the job. So that was the biggest catalyst to like springboarding me into the role that I landed with Johnson & Johnson. And then it just really took some more work in terms of fine-tuning the skills that I was acquiring and really going like in depth in learning those areas. And it took a lot of like watching videos on YouTube, Udemy courses, talking to people, listening to podcasts, just encompassing my entire mindset around security. And that really helped me, transition into a cybersecurity position.
Cool, excellent. There's a few places we can go with that. I think, given that you mentioned WGU, it's probably a good point to pivot to Omar on the education side, because the man's got more certs than I've had hot meals. So Omar, what's your take on that kind of going to school bit, and that Omar is Phil's foot in there?
First of all, go Night Owls, right?
Absolutely.
So, thank you, Phil. Shout out to WGU. I might be heading back there. Don't tell the wife. It's just the way they set up their coursework is too enticing, right? Like you could just sit there and eat for a good solid time, and then suddenly you're not wasting any time. I love that you hit all the majors, right? So you talked about certs, you talked about networking, you talked about education, right, as well, and then also like distilling, all of that. Before we jump in, because I'll talk about certs all day, you guys know, right? But
Dangerous.
yeah, right. How did you cultivate that self-awareness, right? Because not a lot of people, like some people would say, I'm going to do a SWOT analysis, right? And then they come out and they score all fives on a 1 to 5 scale, right? Like I'm amazing, right? And then you're like, my friend, that's not going to help anyone. But it seems as though like you did it. You had some stuff to work. How is that something you've had all your life? Is it something you cultivated recently? Like where did that come from?
This is actually just all recent work that I've been doing on myself just to improve myself and really push myself in terms of growing my career. Last night, I actually was watching A Different World, which we know is a spinoff of The Cosby Show.
Yep.
And there was an episode where, Dwayne Wayne had went to a job fair, and there was a company called Kanishiwa Electronics, and he was trying to get a job, and the CEO of the company was there, and he spilled coffee in the interview on the interviewer. So Claire Huxtable from The Cosby Show knew the CEO and made a connection with the CEO to get Dwayne Wayne the job. So that whole making the connection of like, you don't have to work as hard as opposed to working smart. The hard work definitely matters. You have to put in the hard work. But there's a saying that my life coach from some years back told me, he's like, when you're prepared and an opportunity presents itself, that's what creates success. And it's so important to be prepared for the opportunities that present themselves, because I could want to be in cybersecurity, but if I'm not doing that work of staying up late at night, creating my, virtual lab, going to conferences, getting certification, joining professional organizations, it's kind of all in vain because you're just doing it without a real goal in mind. And it's really important to actually write those goals out on paper, to actually see them. And once you reach something, to cross it off the list. It adds some completion to the process, to know, like, look, I've set a goal for myself. These are the steps that I'm going through, and I'm checking these off, and I'm going through, and I get to a point where I've crossed everything off the list. But then you have to ask yourself, now what? Because you can get all of the things, you can get all the certifications, you get all of the education, but still not be able to, land a position. And that's where, really doing some work on yourself to really know what it is you want and how to go about it, and ask people questions, volunteer, sit in on talks and listen to people give really sound advice. We have so many people giving tons of information nowadays, but it's really important to distill that and know who's giving you sound advice and who's not. So that's been my mainstay of trying to really hone in on what it is that I wanted to do.
I think that's some really good advice there. And I mean, going back to sort of Cosby Show spin-off piece about, the making the connection aspect to that. What I thought you were actually going to say is the phrase, like, it's not what you know, it's who you know, kind of thing, which is, and I'm glad you didn't, actually, because I think a lot of the time that can get bandied around kind of cynically as a sort of proxy for nepotism, is kind of like the way forward and whatnot. And certainly that is true, that does happen. But on the flip side of it as well is there's very much an aspect of, having at least a bit of an in really does help. And if you can make that connection with somebody, if you can kind of build that trust, then, or at least have a a bit of rapport, a reason that, something that makes you stand out from the crowd against all the other people who have got all the certs and they've gone and checked all the boxes and have ostensibly made themselves like human versions of one of those kind of late 80s, early 90s Apple demos where Steve Jobs was like, I don't care, just make it look like it works.
Right.
Then that's worth a lot more, because otherwise you do kind of just look, with all of the certs, you can just look like, a concept model. It's like, all right, well, actually put you out into the real world. Oh no, it's all style, not a lot of substance.
Yeah. There's someone that I was working with in an organization called the Black Cybersecurity Association. And he said, don't become a paper champ. And that stuck with me, because you can get all of these certs, but really have no actual skill. If you've never, even just doing something like try hack me or hack the box to learn concepts and actually have some application that you can apply it to, it's really important. And the only reason why I didn't say it's not what you know, it's who you know, because I learned that I'm 100% responsible for my career. I don't have to do this. I can choose to do anything it is that I want to do. But if I'm going to do this as my career, then I have to take ownership of knowing what it is that I lack, but also what it is that I bring to the table, and just being very aware of those two things has changed my mindset dramatically.
With that awareness, I mean, coming back to Omar's original question, with that awareness of looking at yourself and what you offer and what you can bring to the table, I know part of your struggle. I remember we were talking about that hotel, that garden hotel bar at that place in the West Village.
We have to get back there.
That time. It's a good spot. I mean, not right now because it's freezing as hell. But a night out one day. But I remember what part of your struggle that you articulated was, because I've done help desk, I'm putting myself out there for cyber roles, and all these people who are reaching out to me for help desk roles, partly because I assume, one, because you come up in searches as a guy who's done help desk, so that's what they're looking for, just regardless of what your kind of like intent is there. Two, the people who are doing this and reaching out to you, ignoring what your stated intent is, are a bit stupid. But did that struggle from trying to unpigeonhole yourself? Not that you pigeonholed, but other people pigeonholing you as purely a help desk guy. Did that drive in part let me go and look at myself and my skills and like how I'm presenting myself in that regard?
Absolutely. When I looked at my resume, someone reviewed my resume and she said, this doesn't speak to cyber. This speaks to help desk. And I think that was one part of it. But when I really looked at what I wanted to do long term, I said, okay, let me work this backwards. If this is the goal, I don't know, say I want to be the security architect. Okay, what are the steps to become a security architect? Let me start from the beginning. And that's something that I never did in the process of like, okay, I want to get into security. When I look at my resume, it says nothing but help desk roles, or the roles that I've had that are somewhat systems analysts or sysadmin or whatever the case may be. I'm not speaking the language of the people who are doing the hiring. So if I go to a job description and it says I need, say if it's an entry-level position that requires 2 years of experience, okay, what do I need in those 2 years of experience? These are the tools that I need. These are the projects that I need to have led. These are the teams that I need to have worked on. Like, what are all of the things that I need in order to land these positions? And I just started looking at job descriptions and just kind of refining that down. I'd put it in Excel and I would filter out like what words, the keywords. Now we can put everything into ChatGPT and get some better results. But before we didn't have that. So I was like, okay, let me just put this in Excel. I take out the words and I put them in a list and I say, okay, these are the tools that I need. These are the skills. These are the organizations that people are looking at that are developing programs that they'll want to hire people from. I'm just basically looking at all of the information available to me, taking that and comparing it against my resume, say, okay, I need to shore up my networking skills. I need to, whatever the case may be, I need to try to find ways to integrate these words into my resume. But before I do that, I need to get the experience. And being in a help desk, depending on how the organization is structured, you don't really always have that opportunity. Some help desks are very siloed, where you only can do help desks. You never get a chance to work with other teams. You never get a chance to shadow the networking team or the security team, or it's really difficult in certain organizations. So in that position that I was in, I had been with MSK, it's going on around 7 years, and I was on the help desk, and I was also a full-time employee, but it's still through a contract. So I didn't feel satisfied where I was. And the thing that I noticed was I hadn't taken any risk in my entire career. And that was so important for me to realize that. I never said, okay, I've been working help desk for a while. What's going to take for me to move out of a help desk position? And that's going to involve taking some risk. And that's where going back to school came in. I was 41 when I started WGU. And, I initially wanted to be an architect. I went to school initially for that. And I decided that's not what I wanted to do. But in that process, I saw someone in my classes who was around 60 years old, and he was going back to school to be an architect. And that's something that came to me and said, well, it's never too late to go back to school. That's the one thing that no one can take away from you. So just taking risk, but really looking at what I want to do, and is that risk worth the reward? Am I going to have to take some steps back in order to get 3 steps forward? All of those things just, mulled around in my head. So that's really what landed me on really getting into the nitty-gritty of what it's going to take to get past this help desk hell that I was in. And yeah, it was really tough mentally. But the struggles that we go through really, are a testament to show us what we're made of. And I've really done the work to try to prove that to myself.
Yeah, it does feel like it seems like a stupid situation where one of the typical, or one of the widely considered kind of like mainstream routes into cybersecurity is actually to have done a help desk role, because you're like either if you've managed to get yourself out of level 1, like absolute frontline, level 2 and 3, it lends itself quite well to incident responders and security operations centers. But for you to have been in a position where even despite having that experience, you still found it a struggle to get in, even though it's kind of like almost the archetypal route into it. It almost seems like it's a dire indictment of the state of cybersecurity, the cybersecurity industry as it goes, as to people getting jobs these days.
Well, it could be, or it could have just been me. Sometimes it's just having the humility to say, maybe it's just me, and what am I doing wrong? And I think when we look at finding jobs, we look at companies as like, this company will be lucky to have me. And that could definitely be the case. But the company at the end of the day has a bottom line, and that's to make money. And if putting you in position where you're not necessarily generating revenue for the organization. You're a cost center for the organization, and you cost the organization money in implementing, hiring you and all the other things with running a security program. You really have to look at it from both sides. Like, okay, I offer this, but what can I do to position myself better, to make myself more attractive to this organization that's doing the hiring? So if a company has a need and you've identified ways to, whether it's save money or save time or be able to do more with less, and you can present that to the organization. Because one thing I never did within that help desk position was look at ways we can implement security practices from the help desk level that help protect the organization. It took me landing a cybersecurity position to really look at things from like the bottom up, because the help desk is the first line of defense for any organization. They're gonna get the tickets of, I got an email, this link looks funny, I got a phone call from somebody asking me, to sign into some weird site or whatever the case may be. If you really look at how you can really position yourself, even at the help desk, to offer like the business something that helps protect them, something that helps, saves money somewhere, like I was saying before, it really changes how you position yourself in terms of like, okay, these are the assets or the skills that I have that I can offer. Because in the help desk, I could have went to the security team and say, hey, I want to shadow the security team, just, when I have some bandwidth. I've gained this certification, or, I'm thinking about getting a security certification or going back to school, really searching internally to try to find ways to move up the ladder, so to speak. And that's something that I personally never did, but it took me making connections and networking to hear these things being echoed. And it really changed how I thought about getting into security from the help desk. Now, every company is not built the same. So there's going to be some organizations where you can start at the help desk and move into a security position. So it's being aware of where you want to be and taking what's presented in front of you and finding ways to do that position better than the opportunity that's given to you. That really makes a difference.
Makes a lot of sense there. And I think
Go on. Yeah, just really, I wanted to jump on. Are you seeing that that's still something the industry hasn't done? Like your approach to things struck me as, hey, maybe I'm considered a cost center. I got to turn myself into a profit or generate some sort of positive ROI on them bringing me on, right? So at the micro level, right, for you. And it seems as though that's still constantly what the security industry itself is almost grappling with regarding, hey, we'll keep you safe. Okay, but what does that mean?
Right.
Like so would there be, from your vantage point, what's some of the things that you think, cyber as a capability could do, right, to adopt your mindset? Because it's a great one to have, right? Like that you stopped us in our tracks with, hey, it could have been me, right? Like having that self-awareness, right, and saying, hey, that's them breaks, and not getting sad, right? And just then getting after it and trying to improve. Cyber as a whole, I think, what do you think it could do?
Really, I think it's positioned on what are the organization's needs. There are some organizations where they like to hire from within. And then some organizations that really are just looking for the best talent possible. And I think recently it's come down to like the opportunity has to match for all of the parties involved. The company itself needs to look internally at what skills do we need in order to run this security program successfully. Do we have a pipeline of talent that we can take from the help desk and can train up? And what's the cost associated with that versus going externally, trying to find new talent, and what's the cost associated with that? Because we know with every company, it comes down to how much is this going to cost us? And I think it's really important to know that a person like me who was in a help desk who really wants to change their trajectory just needs an opportunity. Like, I just need a chance. Give me a chance to prove myself. Put me in front of the person that I need to talk to. Give me the opportunity to show, like, hey, at night, I'm going to school. I'm taking certifications. I've purchased some Cisco equipment and a Palo Alto firewall, and I've put it together at home. And, I've built a whole hacking lab, and like I'm doing all of the things. But if you don't have the opportunity to prove it, it really doesn't put you in a position where you can make a difference within that organization. And I think just within cybersecurity in general, we hear about the skills gap, but I've spoken to people who have prior military experience. They have a master's in cyber. They have a CISSP, and they've had to apply to 1,000 jobs just to even get an interview has been a tumultuous task. And I understand, having to have the skills, and we're in a really competitive market where everyone's getting education, everyone's getting certifications, everyone's doing the hands-on, labs and really trying to hone in and get some really solid technical foundational skills. But just I feel cyber's problem is also it's like a bug of, or just like a feature of what's going on in just hiring in general. Just hiring in general to me is just completely broken. And like I've spoken to recruiters, and like me personally, I think Workday is the worst applicant tracking system that has ever been invented. But the way that it's been explained to me is like Workday is just a portal where applicants submit their resumes, and then people go in and look at your resume. And if you get rejected, it's probably because there's a knockout question of like you're not a citizen, or you don't have a degree, or something to that effect.
It's not security clearance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it comes down to a point where how do we take these hundreds to thousands of applications that a company can receive, try to filter out how do we get the best talent out of this pool of applicants? And also, how do we set up ways that people who are trying to get into this field can actually prove themselves? So more opportunities for things like capture the flag events and cyber games and cyber challenges where people can actually go to actual physical place and make connections and really create a community, which there is a community within cybersecurity, but I feel like the people who are trying to make a transition into cyber really don't have what's the word I'm looking for? They don't really have the knowledge base to really say, okay, these are the places where I can go in and try to make connections. This is the place where I can go and see what people in cybersecurity are doing in terms of just like the surface level stuff, besides what, the influencers really try to talk about, because there's a lot of fluff that goes around. Just take
Don't get on
this
my stuff.
90-day just take this 90-day course, and people saying GRC isn't technical, and like just these things that I hear that just don't really make a lot of sense, and people are not doing the groundwork to see if what they're being told is actually valid information, because all information is not good information. So it's part of a larger problem. I don't think it's unique to cybersecurity in itself. I just think I'm reading stories on fortune.com about how, grads from Berkeley with 4.0 GPAs can't get positions. So there's something severely broken within hiring. I thought technology was supposed to fix these problems. I thought AI really was supposed to, be the savior, but it seems like it's just making it worse. It's not really making it better. It's helping us filter more information, but it's not producing the desired results for people.
Does that kind of, because you mentioned about Workday, you mentioned the filtering piece, and I think a lot of people who otherwise probably would be quite good for a role probably do get sifted out by sort of what's probably relatively arbitrary keyword filters. Like they don't have a specific combination of a certain thing, and that's just because that's not how they write, right? I mean, it's they're not playing the game of recruitment, and it's ridiculous that people do have to do it, but this is how a lot of those filters work. But do you think because there's a few different ways to look at it. Like one thing that I have observed is, this seems to be particularly on Facebook and other associated social media, is a deluge of people who very much come across as though they seem to think that they're a lot better at, or that they think that they would be a lot better at this than they probably would. And what gives that away is that because they are so obviously incapable of doing any surface level research into it before they go start asking people, how do I get a job in cybersecurity? Because that is literally the question that they ask, not I'm interested in a job in cybersecurity and I can see that there is GRC, I can see that there is security ops, I can see that there's incident response, etc., identity and access management. These are the realms that kind of really speak to me, and this is what I have found out about each, but can somebody give me some extra insight into what those things are and what considerations I should be making? Like that degree of consideration behind the question just doesn't exist. So for one, that's the kind of people that go, says to me whenever I see a question like that, going, you learn very quickly as to what's the right way to start about this job hunt and ask that question, or accept that this isn't for you because you clearly don't have the kind of the initiative to do it. But on the flip side, you mentioned earlier about cybersecurity being a cost center, and like basically anybody is doing in-house cybersecurity, you're going to be a cost center. The only way that you're a revenue generator in cybersecurity is if you work for like Fortinet or CrowdStrike, or you're a managed service provider. Like that's just it. You can facilitate people getting more money, like Omar and I have talked about doing SOC 2 audits and things like that. It's like, here's how you make yourself more attractive to other businesses who want to do business with you. Do you think that possibly there is this aspect of people who want the jobs, who would be capable of the jobs, who aren't getting the jobs, are doing so as a result of simply not understanding how to pitch their value in terms of, if I'm just a cost center, if I'm just a black hole pit that money is gonna go into, how am I giving that tangible kind of result out? Or is it kind of a slightly more endemic problem with the state of hiring, as you said? And I'm thinking specifically in the context of entry-level position, 3 to 5 years experience. Like, that's not entry level. Like, have we got a situation where recruiters and employers just have unrealistic expectations of what they're going to get for the money that they're offering for the position?
Yeah, I think the problem stems from a lot of different things. One thing I will say is I've noticed there are certain individuals who don't like to hear the truth. The truth is neutral. It has no bias. If someone says just taking the certification is not going to land you a cybersecurity position,
there's nothing personal.
There are some people who do not want to hear that. And I really do not understand that. It's like, you're a hater, you're raining on their parade. Like, all of these labels get thrown. You're a gatekeeper. I was like, you have to be able to digest the truth, because I think just too many people think it says something about them as opposed to it just being what it is. You know, the Security Plus by itself is not going to land you a cybersecurity position. Even if you go to the federal government, you know, if you go to the federal government, the requirement to touch anything in relation to their security infrastructure is you need to have a Security Plus. But that doesn't mean you could just apply to the federal government and they'll give you a job because you have a Security Plus. That's not what that means, and particularly not in a private institution. And I think also there's so much. There's not a direct pipeline of, okay, I have a degree, and once I get my degree, I can apply here, they'll train me up, and then I can branch out and spread my wings. I feel like cyber is primed to take on what the medical industry does. Like, you go to school, you study, say, biology, and then you go to med school, and then you get a residency, and then you become a doctor. And I think that could really help if we had something like that. You know, I understand everything nowadays takes money, but I just think if we just look at just the United States itself, we don't have the manpower to thwart off all of the threats that we face. So we're going to need more individuals in this field who have the skills. And the only way to do that is, it's not just companies saying, hey, you don't have the skills, you need to go out and get it. We need to pull more people in and offer opportunities. Like, I know SANS had a competition here in Maryland. It's like a workforce initiative where you apply, you submit a video, and if you're selected, you get free SANS training. You know, we need more opportunities like that. And we have these big organizations like CompTIA and ISC2, and, you know, there's so much focus on the certification market as opposed to the hands-on skill technical market. And, you know, most individuals who are going to like a 4-year institution or even 2-year institution to get a degree in, say, information security or networking or whatever the case may be, you know, the curve they're so far behind the curve in terms of the actual knowledge that they're learning. By the time they get into the field, the field has already left them in the dust. And we have to do a better job of reinforcing what people are learning in these institutions and through these certifications. Like, the certifications definitely stay on top of technology a little bit better than our 4-year brick and mortar institutions. To be honest, just on the research that I've done, you're probably better off nowadays going to a 2-year institution, getting some hands-on skills, because they have the, like, I'm here in Maryland, we have in Howard County Community College, their networking major, you actually are touching Cisco routers and Fortinet firewalls. Like, those are the skills that employers are looking for. And if we had more of these companies really offering the education and the opportunity to touch these tools, but not at a cost that's so prohibitive. Like, taking a Fortinet class is thousands of dollars. Going to take a SANS course is thousands of dollars. And if those are the skills that employers are looking for, there has to be more of a collaborative effort between all parties involved. The people who are looking for the skills or looking to get the people who have them, and then the people who are trying to get into the industry and the people who provide the actual tools that we use all need to be speaking together to try to find out what's the best way forward. And I think it's probably time for some revolution in the education market. Like, I know everyone talks about boot camps, but I don't think that's the way, because I think boot camps are really primed for people who are actually in the industry already and just want to really ramp up really quickly on the technology. I think there needs to, like, for instance, with WGU, you have your core classes that you have to take, your math and science and whatever. And to be honest, I think in the technical sphere, that information does have some application, but I think there needs to be more of just all around technical institution that there's a part of, like, programming and scripting, there's a part of networking, there's a part that's cryptography, just all of the facets that you would want to get into within cybersecurity. And then you can choose your niche, so you can go into whatever you want. But if you have a well-rounded curriculum that gets rid of all of the other fluff, then you make a person much more educated in terms of the actual skills that employers are looking for. And then I think employers will be more willing to meet you halfway because you already have what it takes. But going back to the whole hiring being broken, it's like that has to fix itself too. I just think we're at a point where we have so many people trying to get technical careers, not even just cyber, just programming and networking and data science, whatever technical track they want to get into. It's something's going to have to really shift in order for us to make that change.
I get the sense that I think we talked about three different things there. Really, there's the broken expectations. There's and that's from both sides. That's from prospective employee and employer.
Yeah.
There's the state of training, and if anything, for all this talk of like people gatekeeping the industry and stuff like that, actually, there's an argument to say it's the certification and training landscape that is the true gatekeeper when you're talking about the CompTIA being thousands of dollars, SANS as well. And maybe actually there's we're solving the problem right here, in that actually the solution is somewhere in the middle of it all, from the perspective of, well, look, if you make a change to the courses in that they become somewhat more vocational skills, because that's the third one. It's rather than having this. We spoke with Andy like months ago. He's saying, I don't need to know how the cryptographic algorithms and all that sort of stuff work. There's no employer is going to be like, and not unless they're real egghead sort of outfit, they're not going to be like, oh, well, explain to me how the workings, the theory of how the workings of encryption works. It's just going to be like, right, do you know how to do this, or do you not? So it's stripping out all of that fluff, as you said, re-engineering that pathway so that it does become somewhat more vocational, and then everybody kind of gets what they want, because the employers get to see you whilst you're doing your sort of doctor-esque training pathway that actually you can do some stuff. You are, to an extent, also getting paid during that process, because residents don't work for free, for example.
Right.
And then everybody has a slightly more certain, or not even so much certain, but just clearer pathway as to what are the necessary steps at each, or what are the necessary criteria at each step to do that, and it's a smoother ramp up rather than getting the certifications and just running straight into a brick wall.
Right. It's sort of like dating. It's like, what does this person expect of me?
Mm-hmm.
If I don't know what they expect of me, I'm just, throwing rocks at nothing. I'm hitting nothing.
Shooting in the dark, right? Like
exactly.
And I think, that sort of situation, to both of your points, would also act as a natural selection weeding out process, because we're all operating on the assumption, I believe, right? We like what we're doing. Cyber's cool.
Mm-hmm.
But some people might go, and this is not disparaging this standpoint at all. Hey, I hear that it's a good technical career. It could make some good money, help me change my life. They get into it and they're like, this is not for me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But if they're in a boot camp, or they're, midway through a degree, and they, 2 years in, they finally got to cyber courses. So they've already, they've been doing all the prereqs. They're on the cyber stuff, but they're 2 years in, or 4 years. Like, it's a terrible realization to have, being that much in, right, money wise, and then go, oh man,
yep,
right, this ain't for me. And without the hands-on, somebody could go, you know what, I thought of cyber, but this networking stuff is just my thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is just so cool. And that's needed, right? Like, that technical, it's almost as though each leg of the table is pointing at the other and saying, no, it's that problem. No, it's that. Nah, it's you. Right? And it's the Spider-Man meme.
Yeah,
right? But just
absolutely.
like the circular one, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's to the detriment, right, of folks, because I'm going to say this, right? And, we're fans of Phil here, but like, not everyone's going to have that mental resilience and that self-awareness to go, maybe it's me. Like, that's going to be my big takeaway from sitting down with you. Just that phrase right there. Like, hey, maybe it's me, like that.
Yeah.
Because it's so powerful, Phil. Like, just the ability to go, I'm not going to, because then it's the internal locus of control. It's stuff that I can change. It's stuff that I can work on. Let me take a hard look at myself. Not everybody's going to do that, right? They're just going to go, like you said, I got the Sec Plus. Why haven't they, beaten down my door and,
right.
and
right.
pulled me out of sleep to go work somewhere? And and meanwhile, like you said as well, we have big gaps that I think we're going to have less leeway to fill down the road, right? Like the cyber stuff, it's coming to a head, right? I hate to be the doom and gloom guy, like something, and we're going to need folks, at those walls. We're going to need folks in those, watching water plants, right? Watching electrical grids to make sure that we're not. So, I mean, it's just that phrase, though, man, it's so powerful. It might be me, so I'm going to work on it. It's so simple, but man, kudos.
Yeah, the simplest solutions usually are the best, because when you have to do all this complex work, it just muddies the process, and you lose sight of what the end goal was in the beginning. It's like, okay, what am I doing here? What's the end goal? How do I get there? These are the steps. Cross them off the list, and just keep, and you can you're not always going to meet your targets either on time or at all. Sometimes there are things you're being saved from that you have no idea you're being saved from. So it's just being cognizant of, okay, if these are the goals, I might not reach every single point on this list, but at least if I hit the majority, it's sort of like applying to a job. You look at the job description and it says you need to have these 10 things. You may not have all 10 because how many people do? But at least if you can hit a majority of them, you take a shot. If it hits, then you take the process from there. You just keep reapplying yourself and just fine tuning that process over and over again. And it's a process. But in terms of, we need more people to get their hands and eyes on these technologies, because the more people we have now, this is a field that's very collaborative. Everyone's sharing information, and this is how you fix this issue. I found a vulnerability here. You need to update these signatures or whatever the case may be. The more people we have, the more information gets shared, and that information has a chance to traverse more quickly because there's the circle is larger, and there's more people who can look at things differently from the next person. It's really going to take a real large collective effort for us to be in a position we can really protect ourselves in the way that we really want to. I mean, it's a long, arduous road, but I think we have more than enough capable people who want to put in the time for it. We just have to make those ways possible. And in terms of like that whole medical analogy, I was even thinking of, when you go to get your driver's license, you take a written test first that proves you know the rules of the road. And once you pass that, then you go and you take your, driver's test. You do that successfully, you get your license, right? And I think certifications should kind of be that same way. Yeah. Like, you pass your certification, say it's just like an associate level certification, but it's enough to say, okay, I have a baseline of knowledge where I can at least do these specific set of tasks that an employer, sets the parameters for. And then once you prove yourself, then you have to go get the professional level of the certification. Now that professional certification grants you all rights and privileges of what it would take to be a practitioner in that specific area. And it's just a different way of looking at, just instead of getting certifications just for the sake of them, it's like it's more intention behind it. Because if I know, when I went to go get my learner's permit for driving, I knew once I did that, I could just go get some driving lessons and I'd be able to have my license in how much time I put into actually going to actually learn how to drive. And it was all on me. But I think when you're getting a certification, there's this hope, like this is going to be the golden ticket that gets me into the dance, and that it's not really how it works. So we have to change the mindset behind it. And I think the certifications would increase in their value if it had the ability to do that. Yeah. Will these organizations charge more money for that? I think they will, but I think over the course of a person's career, they kind of pay for themselves. I think the way we look at approaching the way we solve problems, because this is a field about solving problems, and it's like we still have these problems that we still haven't been able to solve
for years.
Or is it the case that we don't want to solve them? Is people are perfectly fine with leaving things where they are? Like, these are all the things that I think about at night that keep me up, but it's
the certification cartels, man. It's the it's right, and it's funny, and just to touch on the industry and practitioners like ourselves know there's certain ones that are more hands-on, like we know, right? And then that's why they're still like, oh, homie has right? It's a different, and I think there's new crops of them coming up that realize that. And are trying to, as much as they can, hey, we're gonna get away from the multiple choice, right? Multiple guest kind of format.
Yeah.
And we're gonna give you, some of the newer ones I've seen, and like I appreciated this stuff, right? Long ass question, like an in-depth.
Yeah.
Like this is not a let me pick, and I can skip and find the root and the stem and the actual question, right, and just go through and be good, Mr. Good test taker. No, I have to sit and think about this.
Yeah.
And then I feel better coming out of that, going, okay, I have a good appreciation, like I have a floor for my skill in this realm, versus the ones that you can knock out. And I think we internally know, right? But I think there's good marketing departments for certain ones where it's just like, and then because a lot of people still have that, it is the golden ticket, right? I got it, now where's my job? And you're just like, no, sorry, right? But then you're out the $1,000 that you could have put towards, like you said, building a lab, right? And being able to blog and talk about the stuff that you put together and that you understood. Man, it's refreshing.
Yeah. I mean, right now I'm actually studying for the Red Hat Certified Systems Administrator exam.
Damn.
Because I'm gonna need Linux in this next job. Now I have my Linux essentials, and that's enough to at least I know my way around the command line pretty well. But
it can be dangerous.
It can be very dangerous. And I never want to find myself in a predicament where I'm not able to help someone. Like it could be a dire situation and not have the technical acumen to say, okay, I'm here to help you solve your problem. So that's kind of the way that I'm looking at my career going, long term. What am I going to need in the future, and what's going to help me right now? I had started studying for the CISSP. I was like, I don't think that's it right now. Like, I've been really adjacent to Linux for a long time. A long time ago, I had a manager that gave me a copy of SUSE Linux, and he's like, this is going to be the future. And I didn't listen to him. And this is really, really early on in the game. And I really regret not taking, him up on his word when it came to that. And that's the part I was talking about initially about taking risk. I felt comfortable that I was in this help desk position that was going to provide me all the skills that I needed to move up, and just the way of working is changing. The whole staying with the company for the next 20 years is going away. Like all of these ways that we used to work is changing dramatically. So just me personally, just looking at the skills that I need for the short term, knock those out, and then still have those long-term goals and keep chipping away, because this is a game where you have to stay fresh and you have to stay on top of things, because you can get aged out and outskilled very quickly. And before you know it, it's time to retire and you haven't done what you really wanted to do. And I didn't want that to be me. So it's just one step at a time, but just being cognizant of that.
Sage words.
Damn.
Speaking of, we've been speaking of the certs and development and everything like that. Most value. I mean, we talked about stuff that is no longer all that valuable. Flipping that, are there any certifications that you've done that you found particularly useful that you would recommend, just to round out?
So I'm not too particularly fond of the organization, but the ITIL cert definitely has helped me when it comes to how a service desk should be organized, how it digests its incidents and its problems, how they should be assigned, just knowing, how stakeholder engagement works, just all of the things that it takes to have a successful IT program, I would definitely say the Security Plus helped me in just getting baseline security knowledge. But as far as actual skill, I don't think I have one that really has helped me as of yet. And I looked at my resume since I was back on the market and was back in the job search, and looking at my certification that I have, I don't have any certification that I think really give me a leg up on the competition. And that you're always going to be competing against the next person. And that's why I think the Red Hat cert is definitely probably be the one that will actually give me a good foundation in Linux, but will not only help me in performing my job functions, but my goal after that is to then go for the RHCE, which is the engineering certification, and just keep pushing, just try to always have a good technical foundation. But the part that I got from me and Omar spoke about this is the soft skills. And I recently went to my first Toastmasters meeting. And it was hilarious.
Yeah. It's tough.
It's definitely eye-opening, because there's so many things that you're unaware of that you do when you're speaking to people in public, or just one-on-one conversation, making small talk. And I've noticed, even just this first meeting that I've gone to, I know I have a tendency to ramble at times, but this is something that they've given, tried to give me some techniques on making mind maps on how to stay on task and staying on point. The soft skills are just as important as the technical skills. But as far as like the certifications go, I just passed the SSCP from ISC2. And I will say, compared to the Security Plus, I think it's a cert that's a little bit more on the business side of security, give you some of that vernacular. I think the Security Plus is a slightly more technical, because there were maybe like, a couple questions that really had me stop and had to read the question over a couple of times, particularly because of how ISC does their proctoring. Once you make a selection, you got to stick with it, as opposed to Security Plus, you can go back and you can't
flag. You can't flag anymore.
Right. Yeah. So I would definitely say I had to know the answers were the right answers versus knowing why it was the wrong answer. And that's something that I like about the ISC2 certifications. Like, you really need to know why this is the right answer versus it being the wrong answer. And I think that helps you increase your knowledge base tremendously. So I think that's definitely probably the closest one I would say that I would put next to the ITIL certification, that has given me something that I can really use in my day-to-day and really helps me in my day-to-day work.
Fair enough. Well, there you have it. Certs aren't everything, but some of them are worth it. But more important, networking and introspection. Phil,
absolutely,
it has been absolutely real and a pleasure to have you. Look forward to having you back on again at some point. But for now, thank you very much for your time. It was very enlightening, and we will see you again soon.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
Thanks for hopping on, Phil. Take care.
Okay, wonderful. That's it for today. We hope you really enjoyed that discussion with Phil. If you're still listening or watching by this point, as I'm sure you will agree, a really interesting dude. He was a fantastic guy for Omar and I to work with him during the time that we were at our mutual employer. But he's been a great guy to keep in touch with, and frankly, I was very excited about the prospect of interviewing him because he's had, as you heard, an interesting route into cybersecurity. I personally, had multiple discussions with him about his challenges in terms of getting into the industry, and I kind of really felt for him in terms of as we discussed that constant pigeonholing of being a help desk analyst as opposed to what he really wanted to get into, which was the cybersecurity space. We look forward to having Phil back again at some point in the future, but until then, our next episode next week will be back to the usual format: short news, some longer stories. So until then, I will bid you adieu, and we'll see you again next time with Omar in tow as usual, because this has been the first time that at least I have recorded any kind of an intro or outro without him. But have a wonderful rest of your week, and please do stay cyber safe. Thank you.